Hello, hello, and welcome to all our listeners. The first time a live conversation about big questions of the nature of reality, purpose of life, and also practical daily tips how to improve our life. And this conversation is under the umbrella in the context of Meta University. We've had many conversations in Latvian, which is where Meta University is currently based, and this is our first one in English. And I'm really happy to welcome Elias Aethos, and we'll be having a conversation about a pretty huge matter. No less than a global shift in consciousness.
So we might not even fit everything in today. Yeah.
Absolutely. And the realm of practices and different methodologies that you work with is pretty vast and broad as well. Perhaps we'll dip into your background and your path in different places throughout the conversation.
Yeah.
But we'd love to hear, in your own words, being a spiritual guide, medicine man, crystal keeper, yoga and meditation teacher. And for our viewers as well, you can see all the places where to find you and connect with you. But what perhaps in a minute or two would be the most important things to really know about you and your mission?
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to this interview. I appreciate your work as well. It's a privilege to be able to communicate with people in this way. Like we started the conversation, there are so many different paths to a spiritual seeker. And for me, in the beginning, when I was starting, I wasn't quite sure what is the best fit. So my journey unfolded by really trying out different things and seeing what works for you. And in the end, you discover that your own makeup, your own system is gravitating a certain way, that there are some things that you resonate with, some things you don't as much. So then I just found my own way in that. And these practices that I took and those that I teach today are a product of that, of finding what suits me. So I think that's a really good starting message for people to really listen to themselves, get to know themselves, and that they will be drawn to what resonates, because there's so much information out there that if you are not using some form of discernment, then it can become too much, and it can become a confusion as well. So just finding out what works for you, what works for your system, and can keep on going.
Which is part of the whole matter of global shift, right? That there's so much going on right now, and
Yeah.
sometimes it's really easy to get confused with all things. And so this is the first time we're meeting and having this conversation as well. So although I have looked, of course, into what you do, and it seems like you have had experience on your path of different mystery teachings, mystery schools, and in fact, from what I understand, you are creating your own program right now.
Yeah.
So could you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's actually about to start. So this was all part of my own personal journey. I just incorporated all the things I've learned along the way. In the beginning, it really the study and practice of yogic disciplines, and I mostly mean the Indian yogis. And that started opening some things up for me, where I started having experiences that I couldn't explain. And I mean experiences that are beyond what we normally can perceive, um, such as there would be times I would be meditating and suddenly my energies would open up in a way that I could feel all things around me being just the same as my own body, having no difference or no distinction between me and something else. And when something like this happens to you, naturally you become inquisitive. In my case, it didn't stay as a permanent experience, but it prompted me to go in the direction of finding, what is this? What are these things that I'm experiencing? So like this, every time I would practice something, every time I would start using some method or following some methodology, something would happen to me. I would have a spontaneous opening or an experience that would then make me even more curious. So like this, I also attended 3 different mystery schools, and they were all based in different lineages. First one was based in shamanism, which is a really good root foundation to start with, because it connects you with the earth and with the most basic understanding. And then from there, it went on into Egyptian alchemy, which is a very old traditional school. And then finally, I studied in a third one with a channeler who actually channeled the higher dimensional intelligence and beings and brought their wisdom and their way of doing things and so on. So after completing this entire study, then you get a little bit of every perspective, and you kind of find your own way in it. And so then I decided that these teachings were valuable to talk about, to try to present to people. So that's how the idea of creating the mystery school teachings came. This is just a series that I'm doing. I'm not yet in that process of creating an entire school or anything more comprehensive about it. But we have a 9-week series where we will do classes in which we'll try to explain and show through more of a direct experience how to do some things in a metaphysical or spiritual realm. Very practical things, such as how do you tune into intuitive guidance? How can you create an environment inside of yourself where that intuitive nudge becomes more louder in your life, right? Where you can rely on it, you can follow it as a guidance in day-to-day living. Then when you are entering into doing anything in a spiritual domain, how do you create a safe space in which you can do that? Because in a non-physical realm, there is a mix of energies at all times. Energies that are here for our benefit and energies that are here to maybe prevent us from evolution. And so how do we put ourselves in a position where our own safe space is safe, that whatever we're practicing or that wherever we are attempting to do is done in a very sacred, contained space. So we can call that as spiritual protection. Then how can you clear your own energy system on a day when you feel off or when something is happening that you can't quite explain? Sometimes just the mind is running without control or having negative thoughts without explanation, or maybe sometimes we feel emotionally off and we can't quite shake it off. So at those times, what can you do practically to sit down and do something with yourself and your own system that changes the state, that clears out the energies? So these are some basic things that we are starting with the mystery school teachings. And I know it sounds a little, perhaps too mystical the way it's titled, but really mystery just simply means that which is beyond the five senses, that which goes slightly beyond our normal daily perception. So anything that we cannot perceive in our day-to-day normal interactions with the five sensory awareness, that already to us is a mystery in some way. Even our own thoughts and emotions are, in a great way, still a mystery to us. So we're planning to go into these realms and show people a little more of what does it mean to be a human from an expanded perspective. How can you incorporate some of these other faculties that we have? And in the traditions that I was studying, they approach this as having different bodies. Just like we have a physical body, we also have a vital energy body, which is that part of us that animates every physical function and that allows us to walk around and be animated and be able to do things in a physical way. We never really think where this comes from, the ability to speak or to interact or just to move physically, have vitality. But it comes from a layer of our being that is called a vital energy body, which rarely anybody really taps into or learns how to work with. And then beyond that, we have an emotional body, we have a mental, and so on, different layers. So in this class, we will attempt to go through all of those layers that are also associated with what most people are familiar about, which is the chakra system. So just as we have the 7 chakras, there are 7 layers to our being. And this is what we will try to do experientially, giving people understanding, but also leading them into a guided experience where they can feel what does it feel like to access these other layers of our being and how to channel some of those higher bodies into our daily life and draw on their gifts and inspiration and energies and so on.
Wow. Well, this is absolutely fascinating. You already, just in these few minutes, shared so many nuggets of wisdom, and I really love the journey, which really encompasses the East and the West, and also the modern, right, the current, present day streams of information and methodologies. And really also important and useful what you're sharing in terms of the structure and the skills and the knowledge for us to acquire right now in these times, where you started with the intuition as being the central one, and similar to my path as well, where I've explored so many different modalities and aspects of my consciousness and different states of awareness and experiences. And it really has now lately come back to good old intuition. And so in a way that is a core element of our consciousness that is with us right at the beginning of the journey, and then we come back to it, but in a new quality. And the way I've seen it, understanding all these different subtle bodies and aspects of our consciousness just helps us to navigate with intuition in a more precise way and in a more advanced way, where it's not just perhaps binary, I like it or I don't like it, and I move away from what I don't and I move towards what I do, but it becomes more subtle and more nuanced.
Yeah, you're correct. Even the way to approach this whole theme about the subtle bodies, it has to come through intuition, because if we try to do this with the mind, we might gain some understanding, but never an experience of it, because the mind has a limit. And I'm talking about rational, daily, conscious mind that we use. So we do have to delve deeper and go deeper. I really think it's time for this, because maybe for some people this is new, but really this has always been with us. We are not trying to uncover anything that human beings have not had access to always. So when you incarnate into a physical body, you already come in as a 7-layered being. It's an entity that has 7 different ways of perception. But because we become constrained to the 5 senses and the physical way of operating, we forget that we have access to this. So now the shifting consciousness, because I think you titled the conversation brilliantly, the great shifting consciousness is helping everybody slowly start awakening to that. But it's really always been a part of our system. So really, it's nothing new. It's just getting to know yourself all over again.
So let's perhaps dip into this a little bit. The really purpose and intention behind this initiative, this project, Meta University, is really to build a bridge as well between the science, the good old spirituality, systems and practices, and the daily practical life. And so of course, we know that there's a bit of a chasm there between science and spirituality, and somewhere it's now coming back together. And this personal experience is something that the science does not necessarily count as a valid data. As long as there isn't an external observer, then it doesn't count, which is one of the little problems with the whole system. But nevertheless, when we have these experiences, we can have them very different. We can have them subjectively as well. And if we look into the world of these metaphysical, spiritual knowledge and information, there are also contradictions. There are also things where you start to combine them, you start seeing a bigger picture, and it suddenly makes sense, where on one level there was contradiction. When you unite them, there actually now isn't a contradiction. So how do we know, right, as human beings, that the experience we're having is real, that it actually exists, that there are those 7 layers, that it's not just something that we're making up, and it's not a fantasy?
Yeah, that's really a crucial question. Yeah, good. That's good job. You were right. First, when you started talking about science really has been predominantly just physical science. But we are fortunate now that even that is opening, and the scientists are becoming more intuitive, because now we have things like quantum physics that is showing us quite a different world of phenomena than what we knew before. So I think there's a little bit flexibility now more in that realm, and it's also drawing people to seek now. Not everybody understands quantum physics, but they understand enough to know that there's something more than what we understand. See, I had these same questions at the beginning of my own journey. Is if something is happening to me, how can I know I'm not imagining something? How can I know that this is not just a product of my mind, and so on? And what I found is that when an actual true spiritual experience happens to you, you never have questions about it. You really don't, because usually it comes as a, for me, it comes as a full body experience, meaning every cell in your body is witnessing what you are witnessing. It becomes a very real thing, much more real than this reality we are participating in now. And so for me, there was never a question, but I could see a very clear distinction between the mind and what really happens, what takes place energetically and in the spiritual world. And so there has to be a level of discernment, also groundedness, being very real about life, because it's very easy to seek spiritually and to really get lost in the mind, because mind is so capable of producing anything you ask of it. It can produce a story, it can produce a journey, so we can search for 10 years and still be caught in our mind and never make a progress beyond that. But behind the mind, there's an aspect of us that always witnesses everything. And the same is the case with the emotions. Our emotions are in a constant flux, but there's somebody who is always capable of observing the emotions in their flux. So I found that when you reach for those parts of yourself that are more of permanent nature, more of a stable nature, meaning I always found that my own awareness, my own ability to be conscious is never changing, obviously, unless we're going to sleep. Though even there can be different variations. But this is the thing, is that you reach out to something that is real and permanent to you. And so when your awareness steps forward, being intensely present in the moment, feeling the reality around you, then you are entering much closer to a spiritual reality than if the mind is running and creating its own version. So mind fluctuations and emotional fluctuations are things of impermanent nature. They are things that arise and come and go. They're always in the form of a cycle, and they're moving through our being as a phenomena that's happening to us. But they are not necessarily our being itself. They are only some content that we are processing as we are navigating reality. But what we want to come to an understanding of is the being itself. So when people talk about living in the moment or being present, that is the same idea. It's just that it cannot be done conceptually. You have to actually enter the moment, right? You have to actually become present and then learn how to live a life always in that state. It actually is not easy because the mind conditioning is so strong that always pulls into more mental activity and so on. But becoming present, even just with the senses, will already stop the fluctuation of the mind and bring you into the moment. And then learning how to develop that so that that lasts an entire day, so that in all of your waking hours, you can condition yourself to always be present. And then one thing that we started with, which is the intuition, I think that that's a place to center yourself, which is your heart, because that's the way to make sure that your presence comes from a benevolent nature, that comes from that part of you that understands compassion, that understands connection to all things. So between these two things, between the heart and being fully present with whatever is in front of you, you have a pretty good combination of how to go about exploring spirituality.
Well, there's nothing more to say. I think we've
Thank you.
cracked the code, and thanks for the conversation.
Yeah.
Well, look, so actually we can briefly take a step back to the offering that you've put together.
Mhm.
So where can we find more about that? Is it on your website?
Yeah, so it's not listed on my website, but it is listed on Facebook. There's a Facebook event. The event is called Self-Discovery Through Personal Transformation. And it's a kind of long title, but then it continues. It says Mystical School Teachings with Elias. But if you find my Facebook profile, you will definitely find it there. And yeah, so it's a Facebook event that you just join, and then it's an online event, so it will be on a Zoom platform. And it starts actually this coming Tuesday, so it's really good that we still have a chance to talk about it and introduce people to it.
Excellent. So the best way is to just find your Facebook profile, and it will be on there. And
if you can't find it, just shoot me a message, and I will respond.
Fantastic, and I'll see if I can try to find it as we have the conversation, and maybe bring it up on the screen or the full title of it.
Yeah.
So, okay, well,
Where do we go next?
Where do we go next when everything is solved? Well, the context of this conversation is a global shift in consciousness, and it's a pretty big topic, and it is about finding a way to navigate this on a personal level.
Yeah.
And so you've outlined some key elements for how to do that.
Yeah.
So can you share, which is the navigating part of it, let's say, can you share a little bit more about the global shift? So what is that? How do we know it's happening?
Right.
And, what to do about it?
Yeah, good thing is that you don't need to be a psychic to know that something is going on, because there's so much happening in the world and so much happening within people that almost to everyone now it's becoming apparent that something really is going on. So one thing that's very apparent on an individual level is that the inner content is really stirring up. People are experiencing emotional outbursts and perhaps thought patterns and things that they're not usually used to. And it seems like it's happening at an increasing rate. It's more than usual. And we know that many people are resorting to medication, or other people find way to do it through alcohol or something else, whatever will help them to calm their system or to do something to balance themselves out. And the alternative, of course, as we know, when you open up to a spiritual side of life and you try to understand yourself and life around you spiritually, then you understand that this is something that you have a say-so in, and that you can change within yourself without resorting to anything external. And so first thing is to understand that this enormous change in consciousness is affecting everybody individually, and that nobody can escape from it, simply because the very planet that we are on is also shifting and changing. And scientists also have discovered this with the changes in Schumann resonance, in the resonant frequency of the Earth. They're reporting different activity of the sun in the last 100 years. There is more intense than ever before in history, and so on. And then we have a lot of different prophecies and things that even ancient cultures knew about the cycles of the Earth, that the Earth goes through, whether it's an alignment of great celestial cycles or just the cycle of the planet itself. For example, one of the traditions that I studied, which is the yogic tradition, talks about 4 different yugas or ages that the Earth goes through. And we have just fairly recently come out of what's known as dark ages, which, if you look into the history, last couple thousand years, you can clearly see that. Constant warring and things like that, and consciousness having a very dense form where things of spiritual nature maybe weren't quite as understood. Everything was much more primal. But that now we are entering an age of energy, where understanding of energy is happening, which is pretty apparent already. Today, almost anybody understands the concept that everything is energy, even if that's really the only part that we know. But somewhere in the conversations, this is heard almost anywhere. And so now we are starting to use subtle energies to our benefit, things like electricity, and moving from fossil fuels to electric source of power, and so on. So something in the society, something in the planet is changing, even when you just look at that, how the society is developing. But then we have Earth changes. We have much more frequent responses from the Earth that is also trying to shed and kind of change its density. So where it's all leading is that human consciousness and a planetary consciousness are ending one cycle and trying to enter another. And that comes with change in understanding, change in awareness, change in perception. And according to my own intuition and feeling and what I have learned about life, also with change of density, meaning that in every cycle of the Earth, the physical density does not always remain the same. We are now experiencing dense physical bodies and 5-dimensional senses. But as we enter a new cycle, we might find that new senses are opening, that our sense of reality will change into something different, something maybe more malleable, something maybe closer to energetic reality. And so this could be a far out concept for many people, but this is what I understand is happening. And this is why we're trying to accommodate this shift that is going on. So all of the teachings and all of the practices in one way or another are geared towards either preparing this body and mind that we have for a higher energy influx, for ability to conduct energy with much more power, or geared towards opening up of the perception to where we can start seeing the world in a much wider sense, where it's no longer confined to this five sensory experience, but now we're actually including other forms of life and other kingdoms that we have not been as aware of as much into our experience. One example is nature. There is so much in nature, in the world of the elements and in the kingdoms of nature, that we can interact with that is way beyond five sensory perception. Shamans of this world has always known that. Medicine people have always known that. So this is something now that will become more of a common knowledge where everybody will start opening into. But we have to do our work also, because we have been conditioned for way too long through our own mental conditioning, through our own traumatic experiences from the past that have remained lodged in the tissues of our body and in our psyche. We have been conditioned to see reality only one way. But now these things are starting to release and leave our system. And if we allow them, and even more, if we help them do that, then we can open up to a greater sense of reality. So this is what the work is about. And this is, in my view, what's currently happening.
So basically the foundation of that, or the first stage of that, is of course the personal and the shift in individual perception and individual consciousness. And you have referred to shamanism and Eastern traditional practices. Well, although there's always been this knowledge and this connection in those teachings, what is going to be different perhaps in the present day? Like, is it going to be really going back to those teachings and to those ways and to those perceptions, or something you see is actually different this time around, so to speak?
Yeah, so because of the nature of the cycle that we're naturally in, going from one that was more limited to one that is more expansive, we are now learning how to look at all things and accept all things from a standpoint of oneness, an experience of oneness, meaning understanding nature around us, people around us, being part of the same energy as we are, not necessarily having these firm boundaries anymore of I am an individual person and you are one. Because when that becomes very strong, then what happens is that we start seeing differences. We start worrying about survival. And then that's how eventually people start worrying with each other, because the sense of separateness is too strong. It's bounding us. It's no longer even being limited just by the physical separateness of our bodies, but we also form an ego that gives you a whole other sense of separateness, where you are suddenly an individual that has to fight for survival and so on. So all of these ideas are becoming released, and we're coming closer to an understanding of unity and oneness. And one of the expressions of that is this intuitive guidance that we talked about at the beginning, the understanding of the heart and the compassion of the heart. And so everything that heart prompts us to do, like service to others, is one expression of starting to understand oneness. Another simple example would be when you're entering an interaction, then trying to consider every person's perspective before you take any action. This is one attempt to slowly start entering this understanding of what oneness is. But really, the way it's trying to happen is energetically. It's not something that we can control. It's just the process of evolution. It's evolution of going from physical carbon-based form to a form that has energetic access to everything, that becomes an energy form itself. So I think that the human being is actually being upgraded, and it's evolving to something that we're not familiar with yet. We will only become once the really change happens, but it's slowly starting to come into our being, and it's starting to override the old programming that we have held on for too long, which was mostly mental based, mostly ego based, and kind of locked in only in a five sensory reality. So now it's moving beyond. So all of these teachings that are coming, though they have been around for a very long time, now they have a much different context, because now they're directly preparing us for the reality that we will be facing. They're directly helping us open up into more. If you try to do the same teachings maybe 1,000 years ago, it would be much more difficult, because you are still in the part of the dark cycle where no matter how hard you try, you can create an individual breakthrough, and you can become spiritualized as a person individually. But society was very much always at the same level. The same story with, when Jesus walked the earth, that he was really never really fully understood. It comes from that we were in a part of the cycle where society in general was very dense in understanding. But now it's happening to everybody at the same time. The whole collective is changing through the cycle. So now we have the opportunity to take those same teachings and apply them with much more efficiency. They're helping us now open much quicker because it's not just one person seeking. Now everybody's on the same page. Everybody's understanding that something is going on. So I think that's a big advantage, and that's the big difference. And also calls to urgency to really understand that now is the opportunity. That the cycle of awakening is quickened, that we can do it now much faster because of the nature of the energies that are on the planet. So this is the best time to be alive and to do the work of spiritual seeking.
Best time to be alive.
Yes.
Although it doesn't seem like that sometimes, with all the different active dynamics and intense dynamics that are going on. But it
comes with challenges also. Yes,
absolutely. It's certainly a very exciting time to be alive, and every time is in some respects in different ways. But yeah, it's very interesting indeed. So you opened up the realm of the society, the level of society. Perhaps we could explore that a little bit, and the challenges as well that come with this time that we're in. So that's another theme that we could go into. And so far we've already opened up and highlighted some important nuggets. So perhaps in summary of this part, so what's different this time around is, as you just shared, that the scale is different, that the society is changing on a bigger scale, and that there's a context behind this, which is this context of oneness. And so that is the global shift that's happening. And first, it's happening on this personal level where we see our perception and senses open up, and where we start to experience these different mystical, unexplainable initially experiences. And so to navigate that, it is very much about being, connected to the present moment, to yourself, to your intuition, but also being aware of the different mechanisms and aspects of our consciousness that are opening up, so that we can operate them in a more conscious way.
Yeah, basis is in really getting to know oneself, really learning about yourself. Because if somebody asks you, who are you, and you point to this body or you say your name, that's really scratching the surface. So that's what I mean by it's just purely just a physical understanding of what existence is. That we are convinced that we are these bodies and these names we carry around, or even our occupations or something else, or even a belonging to a family. Or I don't think that there's anything wrong with any of that, but we have to understand that the greater being, the soul being that's inside of us, is part of something much larger. So we are not looking to diminish or say that we are not all these things that we already know. We are looking to expand our perception into a greater sense of identity, which encompasses the things of spiritual nature, of the soul. And so the invitation is that everybody starts looking in a direction of understanding themselves as a spiritual individual, as a soul that is here on a journey to do something, to discover something, to open up. And then when enough of us does that, then this whole global shift as well is much more underway. So this is the basis understanding, is how can we be familiar more with who we are in our totality, so that we are not just confined to a narrow sense of identity. How can we incorporate spiritual identity as part of ourselves and start living from it and start experiencing it on a regular basis?
Fantastic. I really love that. Very comprehensive and very elaborate and grounded as well. And so on that note, I have found the event. And
yes, thank you.
So this is how you can find Elias's current offering on this path, on this mission. And it is going to take place online. or
Online.
physical, or both?
No, online. It's going to be from next Tuesday. It's going to be for 9 weeks on every Tuesday. So see, this event is one attempt to really show how much more there is to human experience, and to, through guided meditation process and through sharing of information and understanding and so on, give people understanding of what all these subtle levels of our being are all about. They're not necessarily something mystical and mysterious. They actually have impact in our daily life, very practical impact. For example, when you understand that all of your energies come from a layer of your own being that is called a vital energy body, that this is what animates you, then you can learn how can you amplify that, how can you draw more vitality from that aspect of yourself. But first you have to know it's there. And then when you understand your emotional body, your mental body, you might be able to navigate through tough mental and emotional situations that normally you wouldn't be able to handle. So it's giving an expanded understanding and perception of what human experience really is about. And so then we can take those gifts that we learn and incorporate them into our daily life. It's not an invitation to escape reality and try to live in some other world or perceive some other reality. It's an invitation to become integrated within our being, so that we can draw from these other aspects of our being, so that we can function better in this reality that we're in. Because there is a very eminent, urgent need in the world to participate and to be of service to all life. And so we can do that much better if we understand ourselves. So this is the attempt of the series. In short, is to take that expanded perspective, have people taste it and feel what that's like, and then channel that into their daily life. From that understanding, come back and function in reality much better.
Fantastic. And actually, before we perhaps go into the societal changes and dynamics, this spiritual path side of things, perhaps if we can call that, traditionally in the big traditions is very much about escaping the wheel of samsara and waking up from the illusion and really, leaving this world as soon as possible to the real reality in the spiritual world. So it really seems like there's so much about now the embodiment and really bringing the heaven on earth, and the direction has almost switched.
Yeah.
And there are ways how I conceptualize and integrate that in my life, but how do you see that? Like, there's a certain contradiction, and how do we square that circle?
Yeah, you are right on. I think a lot of emphasis is given on the futility of kind of human existence. So then there is this desire to transcend or go somewhere beyond. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, because each soul, I think, should strive towards their own evolution. And just the term spiritual means of the spirit. So it's transcending the matter and starting to understand spirit, starting to understand more subtle levels of reality that are more metaphysical, spiritual. So I think if somebody chooses that path, that's completely all right, because it is all about soul evolution anyhow. This physical experience is just temporary. But there is something that happens on that path of spiritual evolution. There is one stage when you start understanding this compassion and this intuition we talked about, that starts showing you that the rest of the world is in suffering, that you cannot think just about yourself and your own escape from it, that you are here to participate and be a part of it. So I think where spirituality sometimes gets misunderstood is that it's another form of escapism, like trying to avoid reality and then just be in some heavenly realm. But it's not. It's understanding deeper parts of our own being and bringing them in to function along with you in this reality that we are already operating in, because the world really is in the need. I mean, if we just look around, the level of poverty and hunger in the world and all these other things that are happening currently, the war situations and the weather changes and so on, there's so much need in humanity to help, to be participating, to find ways to unify people and so on. So the work is there and it's very tangible, and we cannot afford escapism. We have to understand spirituality from a grounded perspective. So in Buddhist tradition, they have this idea of a bodhisattva.
That's exactly what I'm thinking about right now.
Right. So that says that yes, you can come to a point of transcending the understanding of spiritual evolution of this world, but you choose not to leave it because you understand that there are many more that are seeking. So then you, even though you have attained to a certain level, you come back to help everyone else go along on the path. So I think this is much closer to a more holistic understanding of what spirituality is, because why would then be so many teachers here doing really genuine work? Now, every teacher I ever studied is very involved in the world. They're very much active, not just in spiritual things, but things like fixing the environment and addressing the social changes and political changes and so on. Every aspect of life is valid, and we cannot use spirituality to negate something else or to leave something else behind. Spirituality is always about inclusion. So we're asking to include all those parts as a part of ourself and to approach them from a higher spiritual perspective. I think that's a much healthier way to go about it.
Brilliant. There's a process or an idea, and the way we phrase it anyway, the concept's called spiritual bypassing, right? So that's highlights and outlines really what you were sharing as well, that we're sometimes trying to escape the shadow, escape the challenges and the problems through the spiritual, sometimes practice as well, definitely concepts.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, this is very much part of it. And the bodhisattva process really seems like many could just step away from active service in society and devote themselves to their individual path and an individual attainment, whatever that means for them. And yet the times are such that demand active service and co-creation of that heaven on earth, as we
have
said
to
here.
participate. And you're definitely right about the bypassing as well, because this thing about the shadow side, so much is said about it, and we can write a whole other book, and there are so many already and so on. But really, what is going on with when things come up inside of us that are asking us to change or asking to clear and so on? It's not something that can be ignored. We cannot suppressing something back down is not going to do any good. So if something is in the system that is trying to surface and it doesn't feel good, call it shadow, call it whatever else it could be. But the fact is that it's there and it's bothering us. It's giving a signal to our consciousness that, hey, something's wrong here. The only way really to go about it is to look into it, and to look into it with compassion, and to allow yourself to feel it and to experience whatever might be going on inside, so that it can be transformed. Because one thing that I found is that one thing that can never be violated in life is validity of all things. If something is wrong, you cannot say no to it and try to walk away. It's a valid aspect of life that has somehow gotten into this condition that it's discordant. So you have to really look into it and embrace it. If we look in terms of where everything is going in this change of consciousness and what are we entering next as humanity, I would say it's understanding of accepting all things through love. That is the next dimension of our understanding, that we have to learn how to embrace all things in creation through love. It's about really understanding what oneness is, truly starting to grasp that. So we're making a big leap from this sense of separateness and sometimes even survival and warring with one another and so on. Now we are asked to drop these things and start entering this sense of oneness. So this is the key to our evolution. And if we want to do that, we cannot say no to our wounds. We cannot be ignorant of the pain in our body, or emotional pain, or any other kind of energetic imbalance. If we try to ignore it, the things will just get worse, because the energy on the planet is constantly amplifying the content that is inside of us. So the only way out is to start going inside and understanding what are the different processes that are happening to us, learning how to work with them, so that we can hopefully become more whole as a being. Because if something is off, if there is a discord that we can feel, then that means that unless we correct it, we cannot come to a holistic understanding of ourselves. We will always be split in some way. There will always be an energy that is not quite in harmony with the rest of our being. So these things are slowly starting to surface, and it's very important to understand them and to approach them in a correct way. So escapism is as good as it seems, and as quick solution as it is, it really does not work in the long run.
Yeah, as much as we might hope.
Yeah, sometimes, yeah.
All right, fantastic. Well, brilliant. Thank you so much already for the nuggets and jewels that you're sharing here right from the beginning. And so again, it seems like it's already a complete conversation. So let's expand that a step forward. Perhaps let's see how we flow the final topic of our conversation today. Hopefully not the last one, and hopefully we'll continue exploring these matters. I've enjoyed it thoroughly so far. And yeah, the topic of society. So you mentioned that there is now this broader awakening, or whatever we want to call it, shift in consciousness. So it's not just isolated cases of people expanding their consciousness somewhere, and it really is all around us. So what does that really mean? Also on a practical level, do you have any insights or visions how this change will come about? And what does it mean for our systems of society, education being one of the central ones, because there are so many stories that I hear around myself, and I'm sure people do, where their children just cannot, be in the typical kind of system, and for simple reasons, just because they're more creative, they're more active, they want to be out there, and also there are, of course, these more higher reasons, spiritual reasons. So how do we bring that shift into these systems and into the society? It's helping us, but it's also holding us back. So there needs to be this dynamic where we upgrade it, although it's supporting the evolution right now, but at one point we'll probably hit the glass ceiling there.
Yeah, well, I think we're really being helped a lot, because really the main way to go about it is through your own personal transformation. That's how you even come to a higher understanding, to know that you can change something in the society and so on. But the way we are being helped right now is that many people are already born with that understanding. Like we see a brilliant children coming today, already knowing things beyond what the elders know. And so I think there are many people that are already on the planet that come with this built-in understanding that something has to change. So then these people are now becoming pioneers in their own fields. And we can see that in a way that we are using energy now, that we are moving from fossil fuels to electric energy and other forms of energy like hydrogen and so on. There is some change happening now, that we are doing this with a more holistic understanding of including the planet and the well-being of the planet in it, fossil fuels and things like that. Then in education, for example, there is a great demand from many parents to put their kids in a school that has a more holistic understanding of life, that maybe gives kids more room for creativity and other expressions. Schools like Montessori, there are many alternatives now being offered to people, that they can do things in a way that have not been done before, because it's becoming very clear, almost to anybody who went through classical education, that something's not quite right with it. Because if it was, we wouldn't feel so constricted as we were going through it. So now there's this general understanding that, yes, something is out of place, and we are trying to change it. And certain parts of the world are perhaps doing it faster than others. But in some countries already, the way of economy is changing, or the bank system has completely reshuffled, especially in the northern countries. So there's this understanding that something greater is going on, and that something else wants to be birthed forward. And so now the only question is, how willing are we to accept it and to let it happen, or how much more are we going to fight it? So it's in every walk of life now. It's in every aspect of the society, and we just have to go with it. So I would say that as long as you are doing your spiritual practices, as long as you are understanding that this change in consciousness includes you and everybody else, you will be given so many opportunities to participate in life in ways that are different from what has been before. You will have chances to have a different diet, to have a different education, to use different sources of energy to power your house, or to do anything else you need to do. Choices are now becoming available, and we have to make them, because if we keep resorting to the way things were done in the past and supporting the old system, we are then preventing the change from coming forward. So it's really up to us people to make individual choices, and if enough of us makes them, it will make the global society having to change. Because if all of us say no to war, who is going to then go and do it? If all of us say no to a certain way of life or a certain diet and so on, the market and everything else will have to reflect that. So I think that this is really the key, that each individual doesn't just understand conceptually that something is changing and I have a say-so in it, but let me go about my life the same way I did. We have to actually actively participate in it. And by making that individual choice, we are changing the society as a whole. Because when enough of us say yes to something or no to something, inevitably it's going to have to change. I'm actually quite surprised with the number of documentaries that are available today about the environment, about alternative energy sources. Pretty much everything that you can think of. People are really finding ways to make things happen, to provide even things like free technology, free energy, and different ways of growing food and so on. That's much healthier for us. So all of these things we have to actively participate in through our own choices.
So we know about the big concept of non-violence, so that would be one aspect that I'm hearing, but also non-compliance, so saying no and not complying with what we're not aligned with. And it takes some courage sometimes, and again, referring to some of the stories that I hear around me, it's sometimes challenging to take children into homeschooling and find the communities and to be in the conversations with the local authorities about that. And some are more supportive, some less. And so what would you suggest perhaps to people who really feel the urge and the pull and the inspiration to make a difference, either through, as you're saying, not participating in the existing systems, or maybe recreating and transforming or creating new systems?
Yeah.
How to face those challenges that come with it? Do you have any good tips?
Well, I just really think that we have to get our priorities straight. What really matters to you in life? This is the question for everyone. And if you understand that your spiritual evolution comes first, and that the well-being of all life comes first, then naturally we'll gravitate towards those choices. I think many times we have an idea that we want to change, but we're really not implementing it in our life. We like to talk about it, but we really have to start being engaged and participating. You're right. All of the systems that are old and outdated, that are still in place, they're still holding firm on the most of society. They're keeping us in the same sort of a box. But slowly we're starting to break, slowly. So it's still difficult to make those healthy choices, those holistic choices. Yes, it is. But what's fortunate is that more and more people are now doing it. So we're no longer alone in it. If you were a psychic maybe 40 years ago, there were much less for you to relate in the world than if you start opening psychically now. Now everybody's talking about it. Now everybody understands that there is something spiritual in the background. So instead of fighting the old system, we turn towards solutions that are already here, and we start supporting people that are bringing new solutions that are working much better. So we leave the obsolete and outdated things behind, and we just focus on what's in front of us, and then realizing that many of us are doing it simultaneously. So coming together with those people that are like-minded, coming together with the people that are already looking to invest themselves in new solutions and new alternatives. And I think there is enough of us already to create entire communities, entire networks, and to really start participating with one another. That's why I think that your work is crucial. And I told you I had another interview today from another network, and this is all in an attempt to really share this kind of information and be more connected with people that are seeking it. Because we should make no mistake about, not everybody might be interested in this. Maybe somebody really likes the way things are, and that is all right. But if you are choosing something different, active participation and moving in the direction is really crucial. Of course, it takes courage and it takes strength and maybe even resourcefulness. It's much more difficult to build something from scratch than just to go back and live in the old system. But we can see very clearly that the old way of doing things is really not leading us anywhere anymore. Just our own environment can tell us that, and the way that we have been using it, and so on. Any documentary that you see today about nature is telling you that within the next couple of decades there will be no more solutions available unless we act now, because the nature will come to a breaking point where it will be not be able to we won't be able to fix it anymore. So the urgency really compels us to not just understand these things and talk about them, but really to act, to become active participants in it. And that's really the key to all of it.
Wow. So I can only really echo that, and just once again confirm the real kind of groundedness and practical nature of our conversation as well, and the relevance of that. So it really feels, yet again, for the third or fifth time, pretty complete. So we're now at an hour, and yeah, we can feel into any other topics that feel like emerging right now or complete here. How do you feel?
I feel great. Actually, I really love talking about these things. Just having an opportunity to reach people and to share what I really feel is important. And I'm glad that there are people like you really doing this, and there are many that are just
Absolutely.
spreading the word and doing their part. See, this is the whole thing about being involved, is that it doesn't really take much. It just takes really making a video sometimes and talking to someone,
Mm-hmm.
and that too takes courage. And but it really, we're capable. And beautiful part about it too is you do it out of your own joy. That this is something that you feel like is part of your work. That's the key to it, because everything that we have done in the past, we've been put in a box of something that we don't feel comfortable about. You are in a job that you hate and you're trying to make a life for yourself. It doesn't really work. But now people are finding ways to do something useful that really matches their own blueprint, that says there is a response from their soul saying, yes, this is your work. So I think this is the crucial aspect. And then the more of us do this, the further along we will get. But we can take this in any direction you would like. I'm curious, what else did you have in mind?
Well, it really, as I say, it feels quite complete, and there's so many things we could obviously keep opening up, and we're now pretty much at an hour, so that's a good time for viewers who will be watching the replay and seeing the recording. So it's manageable, and it feels like people can click on it and watch. So I think we could yeah, perhaps keep exploring different other matters some other times. And if
Absolutely.
we have our viewers who are watching this in the recording, if you comment and write some questions in the comments, then it will help us as well to guide the conversation for the following times. And once again, a reminder of the offering that Elias is generously providing in a week's time, less than a week's time.
Mm.
So, self-discovery through personal transformation, mystery school teachings,
Yes.
and a 9-week program with really connecting ourselves to ourselves and really opening up the aspects of our consciousness that tend to just present themselves uninvited sometimes to us through different experiences. And so when we approach that consciously and intentionally, it is a more harmonious journey often, when we understand what is happening. And so, yeah, of course, look Elias up on different social networks
Yeah.
and the website.
the contact is there also in the description of the event. They will find either to contact me through the email or on Facebook. Either way works.
Fantastic, fabulous. So many thanks to you and for this conversation. And may it really provide value and some guidance to those listening, and hopefully see you in the near future again.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody who's listening, and keep up the good work.
Thank you. Much love.